So I think something I've gotten a lot of feedback and I'm pretty confident about is I'm very good at introducing myself in certain structures, right? Like especially in one-on-one meetings or when I'm meeting someone in a corporate context, I'm very good at giving an introduction. So I'll give you a little bit of how I would give myself an introduction and then we'll see. Right. So I start off by saying that I grew up in Seattle. I studied computer science and economics in Boston. And after that, kind of went into tech, but mostly stayed on the product side of technology initially. And then I'll usually pause to understand if people like, because product means that you're working for the company, right? So everything you own is owned by that company. Whereas then I went into services after a couple of years, at that point, almost all the work you do is owned by the client. And it's kind of just a fundamental difference in technology. And then when I started my career, I started off as a product manager, and the product managers at that point had responsibility both for translating what the client was looking for, as well as for the timeline. So as well as for the ship cycle. And then as the industry has changed, the roles started to change a little bit. So you saw this growth of Scrum Masters and more agile methodologies, and then that part of it, responsibility for the development cycle, moved more into the dev team and less out of the product teams. And I kind of moved more towards marketing as that transition happened. So once I had a couple of really cool projects where I did some in London, some in Germany, some in New York, and then kind of that took me to India where I was working for an ed tech company, eventually became CEO of that ed tech company, and then spun out one part of it and then actually shut down the rest of it just before the pandemic, which was kind of like a big thing. And depending on how the conversation has gone at this point, I might go into more about like what does it mean to shut down a company or some different parts of it, and then would come to say that, and then I spent some time kind of figuring out what my next move was going to be. I started a venture capital firm called Tres Monos Capital. I also then really found that what I loved and the work that I really found that I really loved was client work, and that I really missed was doing client work. And so when I met Divya, we had an opportunity to start a consulting company, and then that's really been the place that I spend a lot of my energy and time. But I also have some other things I really like to do. So I spend about 50% of my time on Joyous, but then I spend some amount of my time with my investment company. And also I am doing an MFA and in poetry and creative writing, which I'm going to complete next year. And I'm also learning Indian classical dance, which are kind of two artistic pursuits that I'm very excited about.
See, but you sound so cool. And I also realized what the problem is in how I do it.
What?
So I feel like when I was listening to you speak, I could actually tell the why behind everything. And when I talk about these things, the only thing, like if I'm giving, so one, I don't like to take a long time giving my introduction.
Was that a long time you think that I took in when I gave that
I don't,
introduction?
you
It
took
feels like a long
enough.
time to me, but I don't know if
You
it's.
took you took long and so rewind. A lot of times when people are like, we need to when we are doing product design solutions and a client might say that this needs to be shorter and lesser clicks. I always try to tell people that like it needs to be interesting. People need to be invested to click through. Don't just reduce clicks just like that. But I think I'm doing that thing a little they're
Yeah.
like, I just want it to be short so that they don't have to read it or listen to it. But in reality, it's more that like when I was listening to you, I could understand why. So when you said that I started Joyous, you have already sown the seeds of why client work is important to you, right? Like you did that early on. Like the only thing that I'm able to do it with is why I'd make games. Like I think there's something about the emotional tone of when I start talking about them that comes through that I really care about it. But I think in a very weird way, my introduction is very guarded. So I'm not letting people see why I care about it, which makes it very hard for them to see why they should care about it.
Mm.
Like I've never,
Yeah.
even when we were speaking to our client in Leh, and when we just had our call last week with a new team member from their side, that's what I felt when you introduced yourself as well. I was like, why does this sound so much nicer? And like now that I'm rehearing it and actually just focusing on you, I can tell why it sounds so much nicer because there is like enough, so there is enough conceptual white space to transition from one thing to another. And you still don't put everything, like you never said that you are trained professionally as a chef,
It's true. I did was
right?
yeah. And I didn't really talk about, right, like, yeah, I left some things out. This is where I would adapt the story depending on who I'm talking to. But those are like, the theme lines usually.
But also, I feel like content wise, sure. But I also feel like just conceptually, you have more of a why do I do these things or why did I take these paths very well.
Yeah.
Like, even when people ask me, why did you shift from physics to design? I don't have a good answer for it. Like, sure, I like, flunked a bunch of courses and I knew that I can't do physics all my life. But like that could have been so many other things. Why didn't I go into coding and why didn't I go into XYZ? Right? Like part of it, like I still sometimes there are so many paths,
Well,
right?
yeah,
Like
but that's like someone asking me, why do you write poetry and not write like a play?
correct. But like
It's like, I do. I mean,
but I don't think
whatever.
like
Tell me.
correct. But my introduction does not communicate that I care about design. Nothing about
Mm,
how I frame it communicates that I care about design. And I really do.
I
Like,
see.
the precipitous moment was that I took a course in visual communication, and the first class I come back, and my brain is like, oh my god, everything we remember because somebody thought about it. Everything stays like every poster, anything that you think is good, it stays with you because somebody is trying to communicate to you beyond the words.
I mean, that was your answer right there, right? Like, that
Yeah,
is
but
so
like,
compelling. Like, that is
yeah, but I don't say this. I just said it for the first time in my life.
like
But
that
like
immediately reminded me of, the same story of why Apple had fonts is because Steve Jobs took a typography class at Reed, and he was like, oh, font typography is so beautiful, and dropped out, if I remember correctly. I think he only went to like two of the classes, right? But
yeah.
it changed, yeah, but it mattered, and I think feel like hearing you say that about visual coherence, visual design coherence, that's what you said,
Visual
right?
communication.
Visual communication, right?
Yeah.
You could
That's
feel
what the
that it mattered
design
to you.
courses in India are called in a lot of cases. Like graphic design courses are called visual communication. Yeah. But like, I don't know. And the fact that he started from showing MC Escher, who was both a mathematician and an artist,
Yeah.
also like made a really nice bridge for like, somebody. Again, the prof did it because he was like, okay, all of these STEM kids, I have to give them some in. Here is a mathematician who drew art and like, made these beautiful things and like played around with our sense of perception. But like, oh, this is such a pleasant thing. I didn't even.
Yeah, like I'm not sure why this is reminding me of this, but I remember when I was in maybe 11th standard, I was taking, I must have been AP chemistry, which I was very poor at. Of all the sciences, chemistry was the one I struggled the most. I think partly was at that point I had not been diagnosed ADHD, and so sitting and memorizing things was so hard for me. Like spelling, until I just eventually like saw enough words I could just spell. A spelling was impossible, right? And I've never memorized the periodic table, despite taking like 4 years of chemistry. Like, it's astounding, and just certain things were so hard. And chemistry is very difficult to get a good grade in if you don't know the periodic table. But we had the same teacher for chemistry and for physics, Mr. Heil. Wow. And Mr. Heil told me, I remember at some point I'd asked him for a recommendation for applying to college. This must have been senior year, and we were talking about like what I wanted to do, and I was telling him that like I really enjoy like creating, like writing, right, like creating fiction, but I feel like there's so much love I have for the sciences, and like I do feel like the sciences are like where I should go. I can't quite remember, but it was interesting because he highlighted for me where he was like, there's authors like Michael Crichton who like have written things that are fantasy and are science fiction, but they're deeply grounded in real science, and he was like, that is an opportunity and a door that could be open to you. And I think it's interesting. I think the reason why it stayed with me for years, even though I haven't really gone down that path, is because that's these notions of like the story is not. We look at the story as having sharp edges, and having like that, you're this thing or you're this thing, and it's so much. It's like how you tell the story, right? If I tell the thing that I'm deeply passionate about is the science, but what I want to do is write, like there's a way to make that story come, like there's the way I told it to him, where I said I want to write, but I'm deeply passionate about science, right? Like there's a way where then it leads you to saying that there's an outcome that's possible for you. And I think it's just the more you can kind of share to the person who you're engaging with, the more they're able to. It depends on whether you're problem solving or not, but even just giving a good sense of yourself, right? You can
Mm.
by giving what your drivers are, that gives the flavor to the things around it, even when they feel like they don't align, right? Even though it felt like I was telling my professor, my science professor, that I wanted to get a recommendation from him to apply to, like, science colleges, engineering colleges, that what I really wanted to do was to write. By telling him that I had this passion, he was able to see that there was a way to tell this story that still made sense, that that connected with him and resonated with him in a way that he could play it back to me that was interesting. And 30 years later, here we are.
Yeah.
So I wonder if, yeah, maybe this is an insight that we've kind of
20
arrived
years
at.
later, first of all,
Okay, yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah.
fine.
You
20
can't,
years.
you can't mess around with a decade. We are not that old.
I mean, you remember I just did that before we started the podcast where I was like, 4 episodes, 10 episodes, what's the difference? You're like, double, man, double is the difference.
No, that makes sense. It also is making me think of another thing. So I think a part of it is also I don't like holding, or rather, I think I like tension in the staccato rhythm, which is unexpected, but I don't like conceptual tension. So I think I try to organize my thoughts in a conceptually coherent, like not coherent, conceptually non-tension way. So they automatically just become this happened, then 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 this happened. There is no like up and down, and like there is no that movement. Why I'm thinking about that is like I don't let the story sit in the discomfort. So I never really talk about how lost I felt for that one semester when I didn't know what to do. I knew I
Mm,
don't want to do this, but I also didn't know, like, because if today somebody sees, like, I was talking to my therapist about this, and like, she was saying that, if somebody sees your list of what all you have done and what all you do, they would be impressed. General reaction would be, this
yeah,
is
this
good.
girl does a
Good
lot of
stuff.
shit.
Yeah, basically good stuff, right? But she was like, but how do you switch to something else? And like there is this discomfort of, like, because I know that, like, as I try to embrace more and more of my artistic self, I know how much misery I'm feeling these days, right? But like I know that the way I will fold it in my stories, I would remove this misery, which means I would also remove the path to get there. It's almost like, I've put a ladder, I climb somewhere, and then I remove the ladder. So then people can only see and like, oh, somehow she got there. But there is no way to see the ladder. And like, I know this is like a
No, I think
very,
that makes sense. No, it does. I understand what you mean. It's kind of the story that people are always telling about, like, when people aspire to be celebrities, right? That like there was a whole path to get there, and you are just seeing not even just one aspect, not just the end outcome, but you're also only seeing one facet of it. And I think in some ways you're telling the story in that way.
yeah. Yeah, I also feel like, so I have generally hated training montages, or training montages in films, training arcs in anime. I'm just like, what is this? Why are you wasting time? Let's get on with the fight.
Okay. Wait, what? Oh, I see. Like Dragon Ball Z, I feel was infamous for
Yeah,
this, where there
yeah,
would be
yeah,
episodes where
yeah,
people like,
yeah, 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 yeah. I'm just like, what are you doing? Just get
How do
on
you
with
feel
it,
about an
man.
entire episode of Powering Up? Out of curiosity.
And let's be honest, Dragon Ball Z had entire seasons of powering up. Like I'm still remembering
Now this hair is going up, slowly turning yellow.
basically.
Now one more hair is yellow.
But I feel like, in a weird way, I think in my own self narrative also, I am erasing that part. Like it was only recently when Aditi mentioned that, like, she mentioned something, and then I remembered that, like, how brutally I used, like, I was the worst at design in my class, in my batch, in my college. Like in terms of people who wanted to do any visual work, I was really at the bottom tier. Like I didn't,
Interesting.
like I was never trained. I was not in a big school. Like I was not in a big city, so I wasn't really ever like in a,
Exposed.
yeah, like everything was self learned, which at that point, like, considering neither of my parents are artists, was not grand. But like it was really hard. And how I solved it is how I solve literally everything. I would come back from socializing at, like, 11 in the night, and I would sit down on Photoshop till 3 in the morning every single day and just make stuff.
Wow.
And at some point I got better.
Damn. Where did I find all you people in my life? My husband is also this way. He's just like, what do you mean it needs to get done? We'll just do it an hour every day until it's done. And I'm like, of course.
Like, at least I know that for myself. I don't know any other way. I'm just like, okay, this needs to be done. I need to get better. Like, Even in the arts and stuff. Okay, for more context, I'm like applying to a lot of residencies these days, like a lot of different artistic residencies with different projects. Like, I don't have any artistic mentors. I'm not from a design school or a art school. I don't have a big community of artists around me. I don't know these people. I don't know anybody in culture sector. How am I gonna get in? I'm gonna keep trying until I get in. And once I get in, then I am in. This is a very interesting realization.
I may have to like this may be like a slight reach, but we're gonna go with it. So I feel like this brute force method is at odds with what I'm trying to say
Okay.
because I feel like what I'm trying to say is right that I'm finessing the story to give you enough hooks that you can come in with it me, but I'm not trying to give you everything, you know? And I'm trying to give you enough hooks that I feel like I'm giving you places where it shows the depth, right? Like you could ask me about like what is the transition that happened in technology, or if I had mentioned, that like I ended up like leaving after my project with McGraw Hill, right? Like then that's usually another hook where it's like, oh, what did you do for those 6 months when you were trying to figure out what you wanted to do next, or what is it like to shut down a company, or to like write poetry, or right? Like there's all these different little hooks, but they're more. It's more of like a finessing sort of thing. Like I'm reminded one of my stories that my dad told me when I was young. This like again always stayed with me is like when he was interviewing at Microsoft. So at the time he was working at Texas Instruments, and this may have been like '86 or so. And he flew to Seattle. And then when he was, this is also a classic my father story, Pradeep Singh, like this is how he loves to operate. So he gets to the airport and he's like, okay, I need to understand this company. So he goes to the like whatever newsstand is there and buys all the magazines that mention Microsoft. And he reads every single article about Microsoft on the airplane to Seattle. And then when he goes and meets this guy, I think it was Jeff Rake, so I'm not mistaken, he's like super blown away because he knows everything that has been current about Microsoft and super top of mind, right? Now, did he know the whole thing? No, but he knew like what they were right now thinking about. Like he made that little targeted intervention versus kind of saying, I'm going to build the broad base of knowledge that would really be how I would necessarily maybe excel, right? But he used the fact that he had a smaller motivation and a targeted motivation to kind of go deep into a certain aspect of it, which is how I actually learn things also, right? Like I will much more find things to sustain like initial motivation I have for an extended period and then find something else to do that versus trying to kind of do something that I will try and sustain just alone for the whole commitment. So that's why I do much better with like workshops or structured courses where it's like, oh, I'll register for this thing and I know that once I'm doing it, I will do it. Trying to say, oh, I'm just going to do this thing for 6 months is hard, but trying to say, oh, I'll do 3 workshops over the course of 2 months and they'll be super intense for 10 days, that's fine.
I hear you. I also think though that like there is another subtle thing that you're doing, which is like you are in tune with what is interesting about your story very well, and I'm not.
I don't know if that's true.
No, the way you articulate it, it is like the things that you're saying, these are little hooks. You are figuring out what are points of
How
curiosity.
many times do you think you've introduced yourself?
I don't know.
Yeah,
As in
definitely
like
tens, probably hundreds.
probably closer to like 500. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, right. So I think you also, whether you're acknowledging them or not, you also have gotten
Yeah.
these feedbacks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'm sure, like, I'm not saying it's an information problem. I
Ah.
genuinely think it is, like, I'm being stupid problem. As in, like, I'm just not looking at the data or, like, the information that is coming in from the right lenses. So, if I've done
Hmm.
something, how would I put it, right? Like, so I've applied to 12 different residencies by now. Okay. Every single time my introduction as an artist becomes stronger. And I know much more about what the artist me wants than what the designer me wants. And considering that I have 13 years of experience being a designer, I really should be better at that one. But I'm not because I just haven't
Interesting.
paid the kind of care and attention that I'm doing with these. Oh, like what are the themes that I'm engaging with again and again? Why do I like these things? Because the applications are forcing me to engage with those questions. So then
Yeah.
I realize, oh, it's about perspective and like, how are things being looked at, what is ignored, what is seen. Like these are the things that I'm caring about.
Hmm.
And so, like, I can also frame all my artistic projects like that. But because I don't know what I haven't paid attention to what the designer me wants or cares about or thinks about. I haven't found that.
Hmm. I was thinking about how I got better at it. And I think a big part was when I was CEO of Vidya Next, I did 40 of them, right? Like I had one on ones with everyone in the company and I introduced myself each time. And then I asked them to introduce themselves. And then I asked them if they had done their job before, if there was anything that they thought we should do in our company for their role. And then finally I asked them if they needed anything to be successful. Like it was just these four questions. But I had a feedback every time, which was I wanted them to give an introduction that they wouldn't normally give. You know, like normally when people give introductions, especially some people who have not like, right, like they maybe have gone to government schools in India and they haven't been put into situations where they've been asked to explain their history like that. It can be really helpful if I gave this kind of like more grandiose sort of, right, like really like because it inspired them to introduce themselves in a certain way. So I got the feedback every time. Was I giving the introduction that was reaching the goals I was setting for myself? And then I think that let me reach something which now I feel pretty happy about, right? Like I like the way I give that kind of introduction. I still don't do it well when I only have 5 seconds to give an introduction, but I can give this 2.5, 3 minute introduction that is kind of fun and I like it, I feel satisfied with. So I'm wondering, is there a goal that you could be putting and a goal of a similar flavor? Not a goal of like dependency on,
Hmm.
you know what I'm saying? Like not a goal of like being dependent on them being like you catch giving the right tidbit, but that you're helping them see
I
something
think I
or
know.
okay, go ahead.
Think that like if I was to structure it, I would probably structure it around the idea of like there are these pivotal moments which can be seemingly very inane, but like they can really change the course of your life.
And you'd like to
Like
know those about people.
that's what is interesting to me. So like I don't know if you remember, but like when you first told me about that you took like you went to the French culinary school, I had a million questions out and you were like, oh my god, who is this crazy woman? What is
Was it
she
that first
doing?
conversation like on my outdoor round table?
No, it was
Okay.
I had arrived early and you were cooking something. And then you were giving some geeky knowledge about what you were cooking. And I was
In
like,
my odd
oh,
reactions or something.
this seems like a little, how do you know about this? And then you told me, and then I was like, whoa. But like, I just I feel like that's what makes us special. Like that's what makes everybody special, how we choose to react to those moments and those things, right? Like I feel like I find people's sharp edges very interesting.
So maybe then you know what you're trying to do. So you're trying to solicit
Hmm.
those sorts of responses. So much better maybe to go first when people are giving introductions.
Yeah, yeah. Because now, like looking from that lens, I'm also thinking about like, what would framing thinking on thinking in a way where it's like, what comes up when you think about thinking? How do you think about that question of having the listener engage with their own thinking and examine it? Like to me, that would feel like, oh, it's a really good goal.
Interesting. That reminds me a little bit. Some of those early episodes we did, like that one about kindness and niceness. I remember
Hmm.
people messaged me and they were like, "I thought about kindness like this" or something.
Hmm.
You know, because it did it. I think because we had so much uncertainty when we were talking about it, it kind of came across in a way that was very accessible to people to be like, "Oh, I also kind of have this uncertainty. Is it a kindness to do this thing?"
Yeah, I also think that like there was something I also really liked that conversation. I know that like my friends have also referred to that conversation in our conversations. And it's like I think there is something really accessible about everybody can think of. Not everybody has thought about storytelling, but everybody can think about introducing themselves, right? Like we are all telling stories all the time. It's a little bit like when somebody says, I'm not creative. I'm like, are you not making friendships or conversations or jokes? Like, of course you are creative. All of us are creative. But like nobody frames it like that, right?
Interesting. Yeah, I guess it's one of the most accessible ways of making storytelling feel real to people, right? Like it's obviously your introduction is a story that you're telling to people, so it is storytelling.
And also, I feel like maybe, and I don't know how true it is, but like I'm partially psychoanalyzing myself. But I think it just felt a little hollow when I would try to talk about myself. Because like it didn't feel like I believed in that story because I was removing all the emotional cores from the story. And then I was like, there was nothing left if I removed all the emotional cores. But like now I'm not doing that, right? Like with this new frame, I'm excited to talk about it because
Yeah,
that those are like important. Like if I'm just thinking about like what were the critical moments which communicated my values and how my values shaped my path, like that feels interesting.
right? Like there were the moments when you chose design, the moments when I mean, I guess when you met me.
Of
I mean,
course.
the moments when you built your first game, maybe with your sister.
Yeah, yeah. Like honestly, like both working with Charu and like meeting you because like we had known each other so little. Like we had met a total of like 5 times.
I had
And
recommended you to a project though. Remember, Shweta and I recommended you to that yogurt company, the goat milk
yeah,
people, Basta Farms. So we
yeah,
clearly had some like good sense of you because I remember Shweta asked me if I knew any designers and I told her you, but I didn't really like I didn't recommend you, right? Like I so clearly we didn't know each other that well.
yeah. And also, I feel like, no, I mean, like for me, I had friends I had known for a decade plus who had
Yeah.
asked me if I would want to work with them. And I was just like, as a co founder, and I was like, no. Like, I remember how shocked Aditi was when I told her I'm considering. And then she was like, wow, he really must be unique and different. And I was like, I agree.
Worked at
I
it.
still agree. I think we all have to.
Yeah. In certain
Yeah.
societies, it's very much so.
Really? You think it is
I think
societal?
so. I think so. I think the how counterculture that desire is looked at is very societal, obviously, whether it's cultural or not cultural.
I'm really tempted to do one of those things that we did in our early seasons and be
What?
like, oh, this would be a great topic for next time.
Well, it would, but I feel we should still continue next time. And so now we've given the framing, right, of yourself and how do you think about yourself. But I still think that the question you postulated we haven't fully answered because you were saying it now. Now you know that how you want to tell the story of you, but still now how do we bring that to your work and how do we get your work in front of an audience that is an audience that is
Hmm.
more resonant with it, right? Because I think the problem we're solving is not just how do you feel better about your story, but how are you getting the resonance that you feel your story deserves? And forgive me if
Hmm.
deserves is maybe too strong of a word, but I feel that is
No,
at least how I've internalized what you're asking.
I agree. We should not just brush it like, ah, it's done, it's over. I agree. It's just first step taken. But yeah,
Yeah,
okay. But we should still talk about
cultural
uniqueness.
versus as a cultural value.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I feel like that would also be something. Okay, but I'm
Okay.
excited about our next time excited, I don't know, like I feel mixed about our next time's conversation.
Bye.